Hello and welcome back to another episode of Injustice For All MMA. My name is David, and this episode is for UFC 305, Plessis versus Adesanya. I'm so grateful that I finally got to this card, and I just want to say, this card ended in such a beautiful way. I don't remember how the Colby versus Usman card was in total. The second fight, I believe. I do remember the co-main event, but I don't remember how I felt for the entirety of the card. But the ending of this card just felt really wholesome and happy and fun. It felt really, I really don't know how to describe it. Given all the build up for this fight of just the whole African thing over and over again, the ending of seeing Plessis and Adesanya just hugging and fake kissing and whatever the fuck that was, it was really nice to see. And then it all got ruined once I had to remember that we now have to see Strickland versus Plessis 2. A fight that I personally don't think is close. A fight that I personally don't think Strickland won. A fight that personally doesn't appeal to anyone or appease anyone. Because if we're just going to play this out super quick before I get to the scorecards, the fight that, if we're looking for a brand new matchup, it's Plessis versus Khamzat. That's the next, brand new looking fight that we're after. And instead we have to see a Strickland fight that, again, I don't care to see. Now, would it be an entertaining fight? Probably, yeah, sure. But I just don't care to see in any capacity. I'm kind of confused as to why he should even get a title shot in the first place. If we're banking off of, okay, the first fight was close, if that's the reasoning, sure. But I don't want to hear another reasoning, especially the reasoning that he seems to be given, which is, I was a company man, okay? I fought Costa. That means you're a company man. I fought Costa to a low-key, a close decision. Whatever. That's fine. That's okay. That's why I'm not fully happy. Because I now have to get my mind around the thought of another Strickland fight against DDP. But other than that, let's go through this fight card because it was actually really fun and infuriating at times. So we'll go to the first honorable mention. Okay, the first honorable mention is Kenan versus Kenan versus Glenn. I had that 30-27. 30-27 for Kenan. I believe in the first round, Glenn had 2 takedowns, but Kenan outstruck Glenn on the feet, and both were pretty active in the clinch. Kenan was missing a lot of shots, but he still outstruck him by about 12 plus strikes. He outstruck him pretty well. Glenn had 2 takedowns. He did virtually nothing with those takedowns, so they're kind of irrelevant. You go to the second round. Also, there was this weird situation where Glenn it kind of looked like he dropped Kenan. He didn't, though. So that doesn't matter. Second round, Kenan outstruck Glenn by about 15 plus strikes. And then in the third round, Kenan did the same thing. He outstruck Glenn, this time by 11 strikes. I just want to point something out. I'm going to say this over and over again. Whoever is pressing the strike number buttons is just off by everything. They're either undercounting or they're overcounting, and we'll get to where they're overcounting later in the episode. But in this case, there wasn't really a problem. I'm just pointing that out because throughout the entirety of the fight, the theme of this fight is Kenan is outstriking Glenn and he's hurting Glenn, but he's also whiffing on like a third of his strikes. Kenan will throw combos and will land 2 strikes out of 4 shots. He'll throw 3 shots and land 1 strike. He's lucky that Glenn wasn't landing on him frequently, but Kenan looked really bad in this fight. I mean, he looked good in the sense that he was beating up Glenn, but other than that, Kenan was missing on almost everything he threw. You go to the judges' scorecards. And it's just fucking goofiness. It's just goofiness all around. And that's the theme of the night, is the scorecards. While the right fighters won, except for we'll get to that. While the right fighters won in certain areas, the scorecards were bad. You know, I shit a lot on the Vegas judging. But the Vegas judges, I think, would have done a much better job tonight. There were certain fight instances where certain rounds shouldn't have gone to certain people. And we'll get to that, but I feel like I'm skipping ahead. Evan Field, he had a 30-27. Mark Christie had a 30-26. He gave the last round a 10-8. That's another thing. Another theme in this whole night is just 10-8s that there really shouldn't have been a 10-8. It's almost like the European judges just like giving 10-8s for like body language or something. They're overvaluing the round. 30-26 Mark Christie gave to Song Kenan. I'm going to give an honorable mention. I think that's a stupid 10-8. It's unnecessary to have a 10-8 there. And then Howie Booth, who we'll talk about later, 29-28 to Kenan. Give the last 2 rounds to Kenan. Give the first round to Glenn. Ridiculous. I mean, just ridiculous. Glenn did nothing with those takedowns, and he was outstruck on the feet pretty well. So honorable mention to Howie Booth. You then go to the next honorable mention. It's Nolan versus Reyes. I had this 29-28. First round for Reyes, last 2 rounds for Nolan. In the first round, if I can find it somewhere here. Here we go. In the first round, Nolan barely outstruck Reyes on the feet. Okay, he outstruck him by about 3 strikes. He was outstriking him, but barely. Reyes had a takedown with a little bit of ground and pound. That's enough for him to really win the round. You go to the second round, Nolan dropped and outstruck Reyes by about 6 strikes. And then the third round, he outstruck Reyes by about 8 strikes. There were portions of the fight where it didn't look good optically. For Nolan, it's just Reyes kind of going forward and clinching up a lot. Body language didn't look good. Thankfully, Nolan was able to outstrike him. That way there wasn't any weird confusion. We go to the scorecards. Charlie Keith and David Lethaby, they both have the same scorecard, 30-27. Honorable mention to them. They gave the first round to they give all 3 rounds to Nolan. The first round should have gone to Reyes. Nick Meaney is the only correct scorecard. He gives the first round to Reyes and the last 2 rounds to Nolan. So there you have it on that one. You go to the next honorable mention, and it's Jenkins versus Burns. Jenkins wins by TKO in the 3rd round. Basically, Burns just gives up. He doesn't get up. He got hit too much, and he's just like, I'm tired. I'm laying on the ground. Wins by TKO, Jenkins does in the 3rd round. First 2 rounds to Jenkins, it's a 10-9. In the first round, Jenkins outstruck Burns on the feet by about 17 strikes. Burns had a takedown at the very end of the round. He had about, I want to say, like a minute plus of ground control time. Proceeded to do nothing with it. He was pretty tired and also lacked the ability to just ground and pound. He actually lacked the ability to ground and pound. He had very little. Very little might be the wrong word. He had little to no ground and pound. Tiny pot shots here and there. There weren't enough to even question whether the round should have gone to Burns. He dished nothing on the ground. You go to the second round. Both of them had a takedown with a little bit of ground and pound. But Jenkins outstruck him on the feet, this time by 15 plus strikes, and he also dropped Burns. So there you have it on that. You go to the judges' scorecards. Howie Booth has a correct scorecard, 10-9 for both rounds for Jenkins. His scorecard reflects Mark Christie, and then Ben Cartless just wants to be different. He gives the second round a 10-8. It's an unnecessary 10-8. It's a very much an unnecessary 10-8. And the problem I have with this is certain fighters have this ability to just look like they're out of it, and I guess this counts for Burns, where we've seen enough Burns fights to know that this is what he does. There's no need for a 10-8 here. There's no need for a 10-8 here. And I know you can argue by going, oh, look, well, he's huffing and he's taking his time to get off the ground or what. No. This is a necessary 10-8 by Ben Carledge. Honorable mention there. Next honorable mention, O'Neal versus Santos, 30-27. All 3 rounds for O'Neal. You can't argue a round for Santos. All 3 rounds for O'Neal. I'm lost. I'm lost here. All 3 rounds for O'Neal. First round, she outstruck Santos by 12 strikes. Second round, by 3 strikes. Third round, by 6 strikes. And she had to take down with some ground and pound for about a minute plus. Come on. You go to the judges' scorecards. And Charlie Keith, David Letheby, 30-27, 30-27. It's the correct scorecard. Evan Field wants to be different. I don't get it. Gives a 30-26. Last round, a 10-8 for O'Neal. No. It's not as though she got up and was raining crazy ground and pound. It was decent ground and pound that should have yielded a 10-9. What she was dishing out on the feet wasn't serious either. In fact, if we're just going to be honest here, most of her strikes weren't serious. She was just outstriking her on the numbers. It's not as though she was landing heavy fucking strikes. Not at all. So I'm confused by the 10-8 here. Honorable mention to Evan Field. No need for a 10-8. Zero need for a 10-8. Then we go to one of the more controversial fights on the card. Culibao versus Ramos. I had a 30-27 for Culibao. Close marker on the first round. You can argue the first round for Ramos if you want to. At the very least, this is a 29-28 for Ramos. I put this in the honorable mention category. I didn't put this in the robbery category for a reason that I'll get to in a second. So, let's go to the first round. First round, Culibao outstruck Reyes by 15 strikes. And then at the very end, Ramos had 2 submission attempts and a takedown to close the round. So you can make an argument here that fight ending sequence, he was closest to finishing the fight, the round goes to Ramos. Sure. You can also make an argument that for literally 3 to 4 minutes, Culibao is outstriking Ramos. Ramos doesn't get finished. Culibao is outstriking Ramos. Ramos doesn't submit Culibao, and that the strikes were more damaging than the 2 submission attempts. That's the argument. I bend on the side of the strikes, hence why I gave it 10-9. In the future, would I probably change it? Yes. I'd probably change it to a Ramos victory and still put a close marker on it just to make the objective argument that Culibao could have won the first round. Do I think I got this right? For the first round, probably not. So honorable mention on me. I think there's an argument, again, for the first round, Culibao winning. But I'll take the hit, and I'll say that I was wrong on this one. So I gave a 10-9 in the first round to Culibao. Put a close marker on it still. Whatever. It's fine. Last 2 rounds, there really is no debate. We can just go from there. The second round, Culibao outstruck and dropped Ramos. He dropped him with a leg kick, but that's beyond the point. He still dropped him and he outstruck him by about 15 strikes in the second round. Third round, Culibao outstruck Ramos on the feet by 7 strikes. And then Ramos had a takedown at the very end, a little bit of time at the end, and landed very little ground and pound. Little to no ground and pound. In my view, it wasn't enough to win this round. We've seen fights now. I mean, we have I can't even use the word precedent for fights because every MMA fight is different, / they're not the same judges judging the same fights. So it's a different group of judges. The point I'm making is a fight that reminds me of this scenario is Pereira versus Blachowicz. Last round specifically being Pereira outstriking him by, I want to say, if I remember correctly, on the feet by about 3 to 4 strikes. He's outstriking him by 3 to 4 strikes. Blachowicz gets a takedown and proceeds to not really hit him much, if any, actually. Slight difference here is that Ramos lands little to no ground and pound here. It's just not enough to cancel out what Culibao did on the feet here. But and the reason why I don't put it in the robbery category, even though I personally think that Culibao should have won this fight and it's low-key a robbery, is the optics were just not in Culibao's favor. Culibao's outstriking Ramos before he gets taken down in the third round. He's outstriking him. The problem is Ramos is attacking him, landing strikes that then lead to the takedown, preceded by just the long lull of little to no ground and pound. Optically, it just doesn't look good. And so that's where I leave it, in sort of it's just a weird optics fight at the very end. Personally, I think Culibao should have won. He didn't win. I think he got robbed. I can't really whine about it. It just the makeup of the fight led to a Ramos victory, sadly. I think we already went through the scorecards. I think we went to the judges' scorecard. No, we did not go to the... Okay, and so, judges' scorecards real quick. McMeany, he gives the first round to Ramos. Okay. He gives the second round to Culibao. Culibao gives the last round to Ramos. Yeah, there's not... Again, I've already explained it. His scorecard reflects Mark Christie, and then Ben Cartledge gives the first round to Ramos, last 2 rounds to Culibao. And there you have it. Next honorable mention is Tafa versus Walker. There's nothing really much to talk about here other than Walker submitted Tafa. But the reason why I marked it is because there was literally a 3-hour debate of whether or not Tafa tapped. And he tapped. The whole time they were wailing about it in commentary, I was thinking to myself, yes, he screamed. He doesn't have to say tap, tap for there to be a scream. I've seen Apex fights where the woman goes, ah, and the ref takes it off, and I don't hear commentary mention it again. A scream is a tap. I remember a fight. Not a fight. I remember when Oliveira fought Tony Ferguson and had him in the armbar. It essentially tried to break his arm, and Tony Ferguson made a grunt. He purposely did not scream, because if he screamed, it would have been a tap. I'm sure they tell them, hey, if you make an audible scream, that is a verbal tap. Any sort of audible scream, he doesn't have to say tap, tap. He doesn't at all have to say tap, tap. And I think the reason why they were whining about it is because there was like 4 seconds left on the clock. Regardless, he submitted. Walker submitted Tafa. And I hope and I pray the matchmakers give Walker the other Tafa. That'll be a fun fight. We got the next honorable mention, and it's the worst scorecard. You know, we say everything's the worst scorecard until we see the next worst scorecard. This is 1,000% one of the greatest worst scorecards of all time. I can't keep saying it's the worst scorecard. We have too many bad scorecards. This is the greatest score. Also, another thing, I'm tired of this noise of every time a bad scorecard comes out, we need to change the scoring system. The scoring system is fine. The 10-month system is fine. It's worked for 99% of the fights. It's literally just bad judging, and that's it. And you just need to push that out and move on to the next judge. Here we have one of the greatest worst scorecards in combat sports history. Tuivasa versus Rozenstruik. This ended in a split decision. My scorecard reads 30-27 Rozenstruik. Also, I haven't read it yet, but honorable mention to the judge who gave 29-28. Because you can't find a round here for Tafa. Even that's stupid. Why didn't that guy get kicked off? I know he picked the right fighter, so he shouldn't get kicked off. I'm just saying, it's insane still. I'm looking at the scorecard, and if your scorecard doesn't read 30-27, you're high, and you shouldn't be judging this. Let's go to the scorecards. 30-27, Rozenstruik. First round, Rozenstruik outstruck Tuivasa by 10 strikes. 10 straight. There's nothing in this round that yields anything for Tuivasa. He outstruck him. You go to the second round. Rozenstruik had a ball, outstruck Tuivasa by 24 strikes. Occasionally, Tuivasa would land one heavy strike and then proceed to land nothing else. You go to the third round, where Rozenstruik outstruck him by 19 strikes. Howie Booth gives a 30-27 for Tuivasa. And I think what it is, if we're just going to be honest here, I don't think how... Again, I haven't clicked up on this. We don't know the situation. I'm assuming that he just wrote it on the wrong side. That's really my assumption. Because this is so bad, it's only two things. Actually, it's only three things. This is so bad that either you were watching it and you said, Tuivasa's winning this, and you scored it for Tuivasa, which means you're a terrible judge and you should be kicked out. The second option is you wrote it on the wrong side, which means you're not paying attention and you should be kicked out. And the third option is you're crooked. And I don't think that's... I personally don't think it's crooked. So, there's that. You're either you're crooked in the... Not in the sense that you took bets, but that either you took bets or you know him. But even if you were to know him, you would at least 29-28 it, right? You'd at least kind of, fix it up a little bit. Regardless of the point, it's a very bad scorecard. It's historically bad. Whatever the reasoning, it's very, 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 very fucking bad. Howie Booth, 30-27. Honorable mention of the year so far. David Lethaby, correct scorecard, 30-27 the other way to Rozenstruik. And then Charlie Keach, his eyes open during the second round, I believe, because he gave the first round to Tuivasa and then the last two rounds to Rozenstruik. Honorable mention to Charlie Keith. That's fucking atrocious. We go to the next honorable mention, and this is Gamrot versus Hooker. I was thinking too hard when I'm sorry, I'll get to that in a second. 29-28 for Hooker. First round for Gamrot. Close marker on the first round. You can make an argument for Hooker in the first round. I personally don't think you should, but you can make an argument for the first round for Hooker. Last two rounds for Hooker, 29-28. Split D. This ended in a split D. You go to the descriptions. First round, Gamrot had 2 takedowns. He outstruck hold on. Gamrot had 2 takedowns with the ground and pound, and he outstruck Hooker. He also dropped him early. And then towards the end, Hooker dropped Gamrot towards the end. If you're scoring this like, how do I say this? If you're scoring this like Cheeto versus Font, or if you're scoring this like Cheeto versus Cruz, then I can see how you would give it to Hooker, meaning the drop at the end is more important than everything that happened beforehand. Personally, I think that's stupid, but I can see how in that case you would give that first round to Hooker. But no, I give the first round to Gamrot, blah, 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 blah. You go to the second round. Gamrot had a takedown with some ground and pound, but Hooker outstroked Gamrot on the feet, and he had the bigger strikes. He was landing big elbows. Big elbows, outstruck him on the feet. Gamrot had the takedown with some ground and pound, but it just wasn't enough. You go to the third round, where I think the split D is kind of warranted. I won't honorable mention anyone who gave the last round, if they did give the last round to Gamrot. If you gave the last round to Gamrot, I would understand it, because Hooker barely outstruck Gamrot in this last round by about 2 to 3 strikes. He outstruck him. It's kind of close on strikes, really. I don't want to call it a close round because I think Hooker effectively outstruck Gamrot, but for lack of a better word, it's close, is what I'm trying to say. You go to the judges' scorecards, and here they are. Ben Cartledge, he gives the first round to Hooker. See, right? Close. He leans on that side. I personally don't like Ben Cartledge, some of his scorecards, but whatever. It's close. I put the close marker there, so I can't whine about it. Gives the second round to Gamrot. That doesn't really make any sense. Honorable mention there. And then he gives the last round to Hooker. Mark Christie, his scorecard reflects Ben Carlos. Honorable mention there. We explained that. And then Mick Meaney gives the first round to Gamrot. Right. Last round to Hooker. Correct. Second round to Gamrot. The judges seem to be in line, but are off somehow. They all three judges gave the second round to Gamrot, which I think is incorrect. Hopefully incorrect. And then they give the third round to Hooker. So they're correct there, but they're wrong in the application of the second round. That's that. We'll just move on. It's a fucking shit show, but the right fighter won. Okay, the right fighter won. Also, in the meantime, Erceg gets knocked out by Kara France. Fucking just terrible. Absolutely terrible. Sad, very sad. Happy for Kara France, but sad. More than likely, it should be Kara France versus Pantoja. That'd be a nice fight. I was looking through the records and I was like, wow, I'm surprised Kara France hasn't fought Pantoja. Hopefully we get to see that soon. Then we go to the last honorable mention. This one pissed me off. Because I watched the entire pay-per-view and I listened towards the end where they do that little like 10-minute podcast at the end where Anik and whoever is doing the pay-per-views on commentary just have like a little talk about the state of who should fight who next. And sometimes they're right and sometimes I feel like they're just throwing shit to a wall, kind of like, hey, Pereira should come down to 130, 185. It's like, I thought that was done. Anyways, scorecards. Duplessis versus Adesanya. Duplessis wins in the fourth round by submission. Basically, he has a different type of cardio. It's let me gas out and then let me regain all of my air and just go crazy. My scorecard: the first two rounds for Duplessis, the third round for Adesanya, and the finish happens in the fourth round. The first round, we'll explain that through the scorecards. First round, Duplessis outstruck Adesanya by 4 strikes. He outstrikes Adesanya clear here, but when we get to the judges' scorecards, obviously, I think you can tell by the way I'm jumping ahead, they gave the first round, a couple of them, gave the first round to Adesanya, and I think that's because of how the first round looked. And I'm tired of this whole optics thing of like, oh, well, he's bleeding and this and that. Listen, Duplessis won the first round, despite whether or not he was bleeding on the side of his head. He won the first round, okay? Also, the way they fought that first round looked very clean. It looked like Adesanya was in control. The whole optics of that first round just bent in the direction of Adesanya. Sometimes that really matters. The weird optics of, hey, someone's getting outstruck, but they look cool getting outstruck. Regardless, you go to the second round. Nothing to argue here. Adesanya outstruck Duplessis on the feet. I don't know by how much. It wasn't by that much of a margin. He definitely outstruck him on the feet. But Duplessis had 3 takedowns with ground and pound, and pretty much every time they got up, he was hitting him in the clinch. 100% Duplessis round. You go to the third round where Adesanya outstruck Duplessis by about 8+ strikes. These strike numbers are inflated to the moon. When they showed that on the screen, I almost punched my computer screen. They showed that he was up 20+ strikes in that third round. In that third round. Guys, most of those strikes were hitting the guard of Duplessis. It wasn't hitting his face. He outstruck him clear. Like, this is 100% Adesanya's round. But most of those were just touching Duplessis' hands. They weren't even attempting to touch his face. They were touching his hands, and then Adesanya, they were like not rangefinders, that's not the word. He was prepping for bigger shots, and he eventually found them. But they whoever was counting the numbers was spamming the A button. Insane. Fucking insane. It was crazy. And they go to the fourth round where Adesanya's outstriking Du Plessis clear. Then what I noticed was they keep mentioning, it's very interesting. They mentioned, and it's probably a combination of both, but they mentioned that he hurt Adesanya bad. He definitely hurt him. But I think Adesanya gassed out. That's just my 2 cents. I really think he just gassed out. He probably definitely hurt him. Adesanya has a small tail now. I think we've caught in on his tail of when he's hurt. He plays it off very well. And in this fourth round, Adesanya's outstriking Du Plessis. He gets tagged. And he starts to, in the strike numbers slowly start to go down for Adesanya. And he's hitting him. And Adesanya does a thing where he goes, hey, right here. He's buying time. Now, that's the first time I think he's done that. The point in the center of the point in the spot you're in right now and just like throw wildly. He was buying time to get his head, maybe not a cardio thing, buying time to get his head all back in order. But Du Plessis didn't fall for it, and he just went forward and punched him into a submission finish. But his tell earlier in the round was when Adesanya gets punched on the side of the head, he kind of turns. He does this thing where he does like a Chelsea Chandler, where he kind of does like a whole 180 turn. He starts to run away, and then he comes back quickly to face you. It's a small tell that I saw in this fight, in the Strickland fight, in the Pereira fight, the first one obviously. That's his tell. His tell is basically, let me move around and buy more time. And it's a great strategy at first, because when he first did it, you couldn't tell if he was hurt. You just probably thought, oh, maybe he got hit and he's like resetting. Now it's pretty apparent that he's that was his tell. We go to the scorecards. We go to the illustrious scorecards, and they're fucking gross. They're absolutely fucking gross. David Lethaby gives the first round to Adesanya. Honorable mention. It's fucking ridiculous. Gives the first round to Adesanya. Gives the third round to Du Plessis. Du Plessis got outstruck so well in that round. Didn't get a takedown. Got outstruck very well. What are we scoring? What the fuck are we scoring? Honorable mention. Just fucking ridiculous. Only round he gets correct is the second round for Du Plessis. Whatever. Next honorable mention. Charlie Keith gives the first round to Du Plessis, gives the second round to Du Plessis, gives the third round to Adesanya. This is the only correct scorecard of the night for Du Plessis versus Adesanya. You go to Ben Cartledge, just retarded. First round he gives for Adesanya, and then the last 2 rounds he gives for the second round he gives for Du Plessis, the third round he gives for Adesanya. So essentially, this was a split decision if this ends in the third round. If this ends in the third round, this is a split decision. Granted, Du Plessis still wins, but it's a split decision. It shouldn't be. It should be 2-1 the whole way on all 3 scorecards. It wasn't, because of Australia, apparently. I don't know. Other than that, that's all I have so far. Now we get back on the fight nights, and I'm pretty close to catching up in full order. Thank you all for listening, and God bless.